She never expected you to walk away. And that silence you kept, that quiet dignity, it changed everything. If this is your first time here, take a moment, subscribe. This channel is built for men who are done explaining themselves. Men who are learning to let their actions speak. Men who are ready to understand their own power. Hit that subscribe button. Stay close, because what comes next might be the most important thing you hear this year. Now, let's talk about what really happened. She hurt you. Maybe she dismissed you. Maybe she disrespected you. Maybe she took your kindness and treated it like weakness. Maybe she walked away thinking you would chase, thinking you would beg, thinking you would break, but you didn't. You went quiet, not because you had nothing to say. You had everything to say, but you chose silence. And that choice, that single quiet decision rewired something in her mind that she still hasn't recovered from. This is not about games. This is not about manipulation. This is about something far deeper, something that lives in the psychology of attraction, something that lives in the ancient wiring of what draws a person back to someone they thought they left behind. The man who stays silent after being hurt is not the man who is weak. He is the man who has finally found himself. And she can feel that. She can feel it from a distance. She doesn't understand it yet, but something in her knows she walked away from something real. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with identity. Most men, when they are hurt, do one of two things. They explode or they collapse. They either flood the other person with anger and argument, or they shrink into themselves apologizing for things that were never their fault. Both of those responses are the same thing underneath. They are both a man looking for permission, permission to feel, permission to matter, permission to exist in someone else's eyes. But the man who goes silent, the man who absorbs the pain and still walks with his head level, he is not looking for permission. He has stopped waiting for someone else to validate him. And that shift, that internal shift is visible. People can see it even when they can't name it. She can see it. She felt the moment you stopped needing her approval. And it frightened her because she had grown comfortable with being needed. She had grown comfortable with having power over your emotions. When that power dissolved, when she reached for it and found nothing there, something inside her panicked, not loudly, not obviously, but quietly in the small hours of the night, in the moments between her thoughts, in the space where she thought she'd feel relief and found confusion instead. That is the truth no one talks about. When a man reclaims himself, the woman who underestimated him begins to question everything. She begins to question whether she made a mistake. She begins to question whether what she had was more valuable than she realized. And she can't quite let it go. Not because she is weak, but because something in her recognizes what you became. Now, let's talk about attraction. Real attraction. Not the kind that lives in flattery and pursuit. The kind that lives in self-possession, in composure, in a man who is so grounded in who he is that he no longer bends to the temperature of the room. Most men believe that attraction is built by doing more, calling more, saying more, giving more. And for a while, that can work. But it builds the wrong thing. It builds dependency, not desire. It builds obligation, not longing. The man who does less, who moves at his own pace, who does not rush to fill silences, who does not chase what retreated, that man creates something inside a woman's mind that she cannot easily resolve. He becomes a question she keeps returning to. He becomes the chapter she didn't finish. He becomes the choice that lives in the back of her mind long after she thought she had moved on. That is not manipulation. That is the natural result of a man who chose himself over the comfort of her approval. You didn't play hard to get. You simply became someone worth getting. And there is an enormous difference between those two things. One is a performance. The other is a transformation. She isn't drawn back to a strategy. She is drawn back to the man you have become. The man who no longer needs to raise his voice to be heard. The man who no longer needs to justify his pain to anyone. The man who looked at everything that happened between you and decided to build something better from the ruins. That man is magnetic. Not because he is trying to be, but because he simply is. Now, let's go deeper. Let's talk about self-respect. Self-respect is not an attitude. It is not a performance. It is not something you wear to seem confident in public. Self-respect is a private thing. It is the standard you hold when no one is watching. It is the boundary you keep. Not because someone told you to, but because you understand your own worth. Most men were never taught this. They were taught to provide. They were taught to protect. They were taught to endure. But they were never taught to honor themselves the way they honor their word. And so when someone hurts them, they absorb it. They minimize it. They tell themselves it wasn't that bad. They go back. They try again. Not because the situation deserved more chances, but because they never learned that walking away is sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do. The man who stays in something that diminishes him is not loyal. He is afraid. Afraid of the emptiness, afraid of starting over, afraid that without her, he won't know who he is. But the man who leaves quietly or who endures quietly and rebuilds quietly, that man discovers something most men never find. He discovers that he is enough. Not perfect, not without flaws, but enough. Complete, capable, worthy of something real. And once a man discovers that, he cannot undiscover it. He carries it with him into every room, into every conversation, into every silence. And people feel it. She feels it. The man who used to ache for her attention no longer needs it. And somehow impossibly, that makes her want to give it. This is the quiet irony of masculine self-respect. The less a man needs approval, the more he commands it. Not by demanding it, not by performing. Simply by being someone who has decided that his own reflection is worth respecting. Let's talk about purpose now, because this is where most men lose the thread. When a relationship ends or when a person hurts them deeply, many men pour that energy into obsessing over what happened. They replay conversations. They analyze text messages. They try to find the moment where it went wrong. And they do this for months, sometimes years, not because they are weak men, but because they were. Deeply invested in something that mattered to them, and they never learned how to redirect that energy. Purpose is the answer to that. Not distraction, not replacement. Purpose. When a man finds what he is here to build, what he is here to create, what mark he is here to leave on this world, he stops having space for obsession. He stops having bandwidth for what she is doing or who she is with or whether she thinks about him because he is too busy becoming the man he was always supposed to be. And that transformation, that quiet, daily, unremarkable process of becoming is more attractive than anything he could have said in the heat of that argument. She doesn't miss the version of you that needed her. She misses the version of you she caught glimpses of, the version that laughed without apology, the version that moved with certainty, the version that made her feel like she was standing next to someone who knew where he was going. That version was always you. It was just buried under the weight of trying to keep her. When you stopped trying to keep her, you found yourself again. And yourself is remarkable. Let's talk about masculine grounding. Grounded men are rare. Not because men are incapable of it, but because the world doesn't always teach men how to sit with discomfort without numbing it or exploding it. Grounding is not stoicism for its own sake. It is not suppression. It is not pretending you don't feel things. Grounding is the ability to feel everything and still move with intention. To be in pain and still choose your next step wisely. To be disappointed and still show up the next morning. To be betrayed and still not become bitter. That last one is the hardest because bitterness feels like protection. It feels like building a wall so you never get hurt that way again. But bitterness is not protection. It is a prison. And the man who stays bitter is not punishing the person who hurt him. He is punishing every good thing that could have come next. The grounded man feels the hurt. He does not deny it. He sits with it. He lets it teach him. He extracts everything useful from it, and then he releases it. Not because he has forgotten, but because he has decided that his future is worth more than his grievance. That is masculine grounding. That is the kind of inner work that doesn't show on the surface. But she can feel it. She felt it when you stopped arguing back. She felt it when you stopped explaining. She felt it when you looked at her without desperation in your eyes. And she saw something there she hadn't seen before. Steadiness, depth. A man who was no longer available to be destabilized by her moods. A man who had finally planted his feet. And that image of you planted itself in her. She carries it even now. Let me tell you an uncomfortable truth. Most people only realize the value of something they've lost when they see it reflected in who you became. She didn't. Know what she had when she had it. That is not cruelty. That is the nature is the of human perception. We become comfortable with what is familiar. We stop seeing it clearly. But the moment it is gone, the moment there is absence where presence used to be, suddenly everything sharpens. Suddenly the ordinary things feel rare. And she begins to remember not just the arguments, not just the frustration. She remembers the way you used to look at her. She remembers feeling chosen. She remembers the quiet moments that she minimized then, but cannot stop thinking about now. And she wonders. She wonders if you think about her. She wonders if you're okay. She wonders if the silence means you've moved on or if it means you're still processing. And the fact that she doesn't know, the fact that your silence gives her no information to hold on to, that uncertainty is more powerful than any speech you could have given her. Silence in this context is not absence. It is presence. Quiet, dignified, immovable presence. And it speaks louder than any words she expected from you. Here is another truth. You are not silent because you gave up. You are silent because you respected yourself too much to beg for something that should have been freely given. And that distinction matters to you in the long term. It will matter to her too. The man who begged becomes someone she lost respect for. The man who stayed silent becomes someone she cannot stop wondering about. Not because he was cold, not because he was playing games, but because he was whole. And wholeness in a man is not something a woman easily forgets. Now, let me speak to the part of you that is still in pain. Because you are. Even the strongest man who made the best decision still carries some weight from what happened. There is a version of you that still wishes it had gone differently, that still wonders what you could have said or done to make her stay, that still picks up his phone sometimes and almost types something. That version of you is valid. That version of you is human. Do not be ashamed of him. He is the version that loved, and loving is not weakness. Loving deeply, honestly, without agenda is one of the most courageous things a man can do. The pain you feel is proportional to the depth of what you gave. So do not minimize it, but do not let it define the next chapter. The pain is the past. The silence is the bridge. And on the other side of that bridge is the man you are becoming. A man who has been tested. A man who has been refined. A man who now knows what he will tolerate and what he will not. A man who knows the difference between love and the need to be needed. A man who knows that choosing himself is not selfish. It is the foundation of everything real that he will ever build. Let's talk about what comes after. Because this speech is not just about her. It was never just about her. It is about you. The version of you that exists on the other side of this. The version of you that wakes up one morning and does not check his phone first. The version of you that fills his own days with things that have meaning to him. The version of you that walks into a room and does not scan it for her presence. The version of you that has become so absorbed in building something real that the old wound has become a scar. Scars don't hurt. They are just evidence that you survived. And surviving with dignity is not a small thing. It is everything. The man who comes through fire without becoming ash is the man that others instinctively look toward. Not because he shouts about what he survived, but because they can see in his eyes that he has walked through something and he came out intact. She will see that too. Whether she says it or not, whether she ever reaches out or not, she will see it. And she will know that the silence she received was not the silence of a man who lost. It was the silence of a man who chose himself. And that choice changed everything. Let me say something about what you deserve. You deserve someone who does not make you feel like a problem to be managed. You deserve someone who sees your silence as depth, not coldness. Who sees your stability as strength, not dullness. Who sees your loyalty as a gift, not a given. There are women in this world who understand the value of a man like you. Women who have lived enough to know what they want. Women who are not drawn to chaos and performance. Women who want something real, something steady, something built on truth. That man is you. You are not too much. You are not too intense. You are not too serious. You are simply not for everyone. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you stop trying to compress yourself into a shape that fits someone who can't hold you. The right person will not ask you to make yourself smaller. The right person will stand next to you in that quiet, steady space and call it home. That is what is coming. But first, you. have to be willing to let go of what was wrong for you in order to make space for what is right. And that is the hardest part because what was wrong for you felt so right in the beginning. It felt like the thing you had been waiting for. And maybe parts of it were. Maybe she was exactly what you needed to become who you are now. Not the destination, the catalyst, not the story, the chapter that made the next one possible. Honor that. Hold no bitterness. Carry no resentment. Take what she taught you, willingly or not, and build with it. The silence she gave you became your strength. The pain she left became your clarity. The absence she created became the space where you found yourself. That is not a tragedy. That is the beginning of the most important story you will ever live. The story of the man who was hurt and stayed silent, who chose himself over chaos, who built his life with the quiet discipline of someone who knows that the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is becoming someone your younger self would have looked up to, someone your future self will be grateful for. That man is here. He has always been here. He was just waiting for the silence to clear enough so he could finally hear himself. Now he can. Now you can. You already know what to do. You already know what kind of man you want to be. The path is in front of you. The noise is behind you. And the silence that she could not forget. That silence is your foundation now. Build on it. Build slowly. Build deliberately. Build like a man who knows that what he creates will last. Because it will. You will last. If this reached something in you today, subscribe to this channel. Not for motivation you'll forget by tomorrow, but for reminders of who you already are. For the kind of truth that sounds like silence and feels like solid ground. Subscribe and come back tomorrow because this is only the